Hello students, I am Dr. Priyanka Moria, and in today's lecture I am talking about the concept of inflation and its 17 types. The inflation, if as an economics faculty, if I tell you that inflation is a concept which reflects the general rise in the prices of the all the commodities, then this is the partial definition of inflation. Because when we talk about the concept of inflation, we say that it is an economic phenomena that is characterized by increase in general price level. However, such definition is a partial definition, in the sense that we need to qualify two more features if we want to say that inflation exists in an economy. These two features include that the rise in the prices should be persistent and the rise in the prices should be substantial. Persistent means it should be continuous. The prices should be rising and rising only. If in a particular year, supposingly the prices were rising, if in 2011 the prices were rising, in 2012 the prices were rising, in 2013 the prices declined, and in 2014 again the prices rose. So 2013 would not qualify for inflationary studies, and we will exclude this particular year, and we will not say that economy is facing an inflationary pressure. As far as the substantial rise in the prices are concerned, we say that the impact should be considerable. A 0.0001%, 0.002%. We never say that this will be qualifying for inflation. It should be 0.1, 0.2, because when as far as inflationary pressures are concerned, even these minute changes lead to big changes in the economy. So it should be substantial. It should be persistent, and there should be a rise in the prices of the commodities, generally all the commodities. So that will be qualifying the definition of inflation. Now, the types of inflation. We have made certain categories. We say that it is on the basis of rate of inflation. It will be on the basis of degree of control, and it will be on the basis of causes. So in this presentation I am first talking about the rate of inflation. As far as rate of inflation is concerned, we have bifurcated inflationary pressures under four heads. First one is creeping inflation. Creeping inflation is somewhat which is also known as crawling inflation. Here the inflation moves like as a crawling creature. It moves very slowly. So there is no clear unanimous opinion regarding this particular rate of inflation, and the economists have however majority of the economists, they said that if the rate rise in the general price level is less than 3% per annum, then it will qualify for creeping inflation. And such sort of inflation is not bad for the economy. It is rather good for the economy, because in economics we say that mild rate of inflation is needed for ensuring the economic growth. A person was selling a particular, why we say this, because a person was selling a commodity at the rate of supposedly 1000 per unit, and after 10 years also the person is selling at the same price. So the seller will not be having any incentive to sell more. So what we say that mild rate of inflation is healthy for the economy. So as far as creeping inflation is concerned, it is good for the economic growth. Second is walking inflation. Walking inflation is also known as trotting inflation. Here the rate of inflation has been defined from 3% to less than 10%. On this rate of inflation, if we say that this rate of inflation gives us a warning signal for the government that yes, this is the correct time and the remedial action should be taken up. Otherwise, it is going to negatively impact the economy of the country. Next one is running inflation. Running inflation refers to an inflationary rate which ranges between 10 to 20%, and it affects the people who have fixed income, poor people, middle income groups, and those people who have fixed income the most. And if such it not only gives us a warning signal, it tells the monetary policy authorities to wake up. This is a wake up alarm for them, and if this inflation is left uncontrolled, it will then endanger the growth of the entire economy, and it will pose a big question mark on the working of monetary authorities in that case. So the fourth one is hyperinflation. Hyperinflation is also known as galloping inflation. We say that the way we drink water, it is taken in gallops, means we are taking water in huge quantities. So the way we consume water in huge commodities when we are thirsty, the same way the inflation takes the entire economy and its economic system in its gallops. So we say that if the rate of inflation is more than 20% to 100%, even more, as in if the inflationary rate is lying between going till double digit to triple digit, then we say that hyperinflation is said to exist, and it is such an inflationary pressure which is so alarming that it seems totally uncontrollable. It has happened in German economy post World War, where at that time fiat currency was also issued. So at that time the rate of inflation rose to 500%. On the second basis is the on the basis of degree of control. In this case, we divide the inflation under two parts. First one is open inflation. The second one is suppressed inflation. Open inflation is the inflation that wherein the inflation takes its own recourse, and if it moves in in its own manner, and if such inflation is unchecked, then it takes the form of galloping inflation, and which endangers the health of the entire economy, and there is every probability that the economy may collapse in that case. Suppressed inflation is also known as repressed inflation. It is inflationary pressure wherein the government imposes certain fiscal and monetary instruments to control open inflation, and when till the time those controls are there, and till that time the inflation remains under control, and once the inflationary pressures are removed, in the inflation once again takes its own recourse. So this is suppressed inflation. The next is on the basis of causes. On the basis of causes, the first one being the stagflation. It is composed of two words, stag, and the second one is flation. Stag relates to stagnacy, and flation reflects inflation. In this particular case, an economic scenario is reflected by existence of massive unemployment and massive rise in the prices as well. Why this happens? Because of operations of two markets. First one is labor market and the second one is product market. In labor market, there is excess supply of labor, and however the demand for labor is less. However, on the contrary, because the people are more ready to render their services, supposedly there are 100 people in the economy, and if there is a demand for just 70 workers, then 30 people who are ready to render their services, who are able to work, and who are willing to work, and who have every ability to work and carry out that particular task, they remain unemployed. So it leads to unemployment in the economy. On the contrary, in product market, and we also call that the market as a commodity market. In that case, there is a huge demand. Aggregate demand is more. However, the aggregate supply is less, and which leads to the inflationary pressures. Then comes the markup inflation. Markup inflation is basically on account of the fact that trade unions have been successful in raising the wages of the workers, and because trade unions have been successful in raising the wages of the workers, as a result the cost of production increases, and what the producer does, he simply passes off that bulk on the consumers, and the consumers are charged high prices. When they are charged high prices, so ultimate burden in this case is borne by the consumer. So again inflationary pressure is restored. Then comes sectoral inflation. Again, it is on account of excess demand in a particular industry. Supposingly, if there are floods, famines, the agricultural sector is most affected, and in that case, the agricultural produce may not be much, so it will be adding once again, because aggregate supply would be less, so it will be again adding to the inflationary pressures. Next one is reflation. Reflation is a concept which is deliberately done by the monetary authorities. Supposingly, if an economy is getting redundant, and the it is not taking it is not amenable to take off, then what monetary authorities do, they do adopt measures in order to put money in the circulation, and they inject money in the circulation. So deliberately money is supplied in the economy so that people have funds, and it leads to inflationary pressures in the economy. So the next thing is deficit induced inflation. It occurs when the government expenditure is more and the government revenue is less, and then government goes for deficit financing, which again leads to an enhancement in the money supply in the economy, and which again leads to the inflationary pressures in the economy. Next one is credit inflation. It is basically on account of the fact that when people get credit at at easy rates, or there are flexi procedures involved. So in that case, when people get funds, there is once again increase in money supply, and the money supply leads to inflationary pressures. How in money supply leads to inflationary pressures, that has been discussed in the later presentations. The next one is scarcity inflation. It is basically on account of some unscrupulous traders and black marketers who want to take the benefit of of selling the commodity at a price which is higher than the prevailing price. What they do, they simply hoard the commodity, and they sell, and thereby they create the artificial shortage of that particular commodity, and the motive is to sell the commodity at higher prices to the people who need those commodities, and as a result the prices shoot up. Profit inflation is the basically the deliberate attempt by the entrepreneurs to boost their profit margins. They deliberately increase the profits, because they think that if the profits would be more, price into quantity means the revenue would be more, revenue minus cost means the profit, means ultimately if the if the price if the prices are more, then ultimately their revenues would be more, and eventually they would be able to maximize their level of profits. So this is profit induced inflation, because on account of law to get more profits, the producers enhance the prices of the commodities. The next one is foreign trade induced inflation. It is bifurcated under two heads. One is export boom inflation. The second one is import price hike inflation. What happens in case of export boom inflation? In order to go with the policy of export promotion, what the sellers do, they sell more and more to the foreign economies. As a result, there is a shortage of the commodity in their home country, and when there is a shortage of the commodity in the home country, and when there are aggregate demand pressures in the economy, the consumers still are there, they are demanding a particular commodity, and if the product is not available, as a result the prices rise in the home country, or means what we call is exporting country. Import price hike means when we are importing any sort of a good from a foreign country, and the prices are already hiked in case of the country from whom we are importing. So the price is already high, and when it is entering in our economy, it becomes higher. So as a result, again the economy faces the problem of inflation. Demand pull inflation means the inflationary pressure wherein there is an excess of aggregate demand over aggregate supply, which leads to inflationary rise in the prices. When people are demanding more, and more, and the supply is less. We can see this thing in the diagram, that aggregate demand curve is a downward sloping curve from left to right, and there is aggregate demand curve 1, demand curve 2, 3 and 4. It is moving towards right, indicating a rise in the aggregate demand. The curves are moving to the right, reflecting that the consumers are demanding more and more of the commodity. The aggregate supply curve initially is an upward sloping curve from left to right, but at the full level of employment, aggregate supply curve becomes vertical. This follows the concept of Professor J.M. Keynes, who suggested that in short run the aggregate supply curve would be upward sloping, and in long run the aggregate supply curve would become vertical. So we are following that particular concept only. In this diagram we can see that when AD1 intersects aggregate supply curve, then the prices are OP1 and the prices are OP1 and the quantity and this price, the quantity that is being output level is OY1. When the aggregate demand moves from AD1 to AD2, it means that the prices shoot up from OP1 to OP2. Again, there is an increase in output from OY1 to OY2. Once again, aggregate demand curve further rises from AD2 to AD3. Herein, at this time, we can see that there is a change in the curvature of AS curve. At this price also, at this point, OP3 is the price and OYF is the output level. This is the output level at full level of employment. If we further notice, and this is to be noticed carefully here, that if we move from AD3 to AD4, then here we see that the prices rise from OP3 to OP4, and the output level rises from OY and the output level remains the same here. So this is to be noticed here, that in short-run analysis the prices are rising from OP1 to OP2, and the output is also rising from OY1 to OY2. The prices are rising and the output is rising till OP3 prices and till OYF level of output in short run. But in long run, when full level of employment is restored, in that case, when the prices are rising, it is not accompanied by the full level, it is not accompanied by the corresponding change in the output. So as a result, in long run, what we see that the prices are rising, but the output level remains same. If we further assume that there is another curve AD5 here, and again aggregate supply curve is a vertical line which is parallel to the y-axis. Once again the output level would be remaining same and the prices would be rising. So this is, in this particular case, we can see that the pressure is of demand factors which are pulling up the level of the prices. That is why this inflation is known as demand pull inflation. It is to be noted here carefully once again that in short run the prices are rising as well as the output level is rising. However, in long run the prices are rising. However, it is not accompanied by the rise in the level of output. The last is on the basis of causes is cost push inflation. Here the prices rise on account of going cost of production. The cost of production may rise on account of increase in wage rate, high taxes imposed by the government, and getting expensive raw material, and rise in the price on account of any natural calamity or any other reason. So when the cost of production rises, then also the cost pushes the prices of the commodities. How this entire mechanism moves on, we can see in the diagram that aggregate demand remaining constant. Here AS is the aggregate supply curve. Once again it becomes vertical in long run. So it is a parallel line which is parallel to the y-axis and perpendicular to the x-axis. Then again AS2 reflects aggregate supply curve which is on the left of AS1, indicating that aggregate supply has reduced. AS3 further shows that aggregate supply has reduced further from AS1 to AS2 and then to AS3. Means these three aggregate supply levels reflect that the supply is getting reduced. Why supply is getting reduced? Because the seller is unless and until the seller will be getting a remunerative prices, the seller has no incentive to sell more and more, because the product is having high cost of production. So what will be happening in this particular case? Aggregate demand is remaining constant, however aggregate supply curve is moving from left to left and then to left. So if we notice here carefully, at the if AD and AS curve we notice carefully, aggregate demand curve and aggregate supply one curve, if we notice carefully, it intersects at a lower level as compared to the intersection of AS2 and AD curve, which indicates that since the price level has been taken on y-axis, which indicates that the prices are rising and the output level is lesser as compared to the output level that is exhibited by AS intersection of AS1 and AD curve. So here it can be noticed that the prices would be rising in case of cost push inflation, however the output level would be reducing. So this is rather more reflecting, it is rather reflecting a more grave situation wherein the prices are rising and even the commodity that is being supplied in the market is getting reduced and reduced. This is it represents a situation which is more which requires more attention, and it is more problematic as compared to demand pull inflation. So these were the bifurcations of inflation on the basis of rate of inflation, on the basis of degree of control, and on the basis of causes. In the further presentations, the impact and remedies to control inflation and the causes would be discussed. Thank you so much.